Hey, shalom, shalom, shalom lakam, which is peace unto you all. Ha'irab tawab la adam, za achikam yawaman rachadal Charlotte, which is good evening. This is your brother Yawam from the GMS camp in Charlotte. Nachamatam kaya, hamalaka pashamayim kwa ra, repent ye for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Call halayim la la, but now Yahweh bahasham Yahweh shai, bahasham racha hakodash, wamashana la zakoni nawa. Wamalakim Shor Chagadol is our praises to our Father Yahweh, which means He exists. Bahasham, in the name Yahweh Shai, He delivers in double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone. This is Psalms chapter 21, and we'll get verse 8. And it says, Thine hand shall find out all thine enemies, thy right hand shall find out those that hate thee. All right, and ultimately, it's a inquisition and it's a searching out being done into the counsels of the ungodly, as it mentions in Wisdom of Solomon. But pretty much, Esau, Edom's, secret counsels is pretty much being found out. He's being exposed. All right, let's get that real fast. This is Ecclesiastes chapter 3, and we'll get verse 15. And it says, That which hath been is now, and that which is to be hath already been, and the Most High requireth that which is past. All right, I'm going to get this word for require. And it says, Baquasha says to seek, to exact, to require, to search out. It says to make inquisition. All right, it says to seek for, to strive after. All right, it says to require and to demand. All right, let me get this in another version in the NKJV. And it says that which is has already been, and what is to be has already been, and the Most High requires an account of what is past. So the Lord requires an account, for the things that have been done, all right, by Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, so the things in slavery are the things present day, are the things that he's done, years ago, hundreds of years ago. The Lord is requiring an account, because the Lord is a just power, so those actions, they have to be answered for, you see, because Esau, Edom, ultimately, he's a fugitive. All right, going back to, because he has the spirit of Cain, so he's a fugitive, so he has to essentially be, put on, right now he's on trial. All right, he has to be sentenced. All right, he's receiving his sentencing, but he has to go through his punishment. All right, so that's, pretty much going into, how the Lord requires an account of the past. All right, he has to be punished, for the things that he's done. Ecclesiastes, the 8th chapter, essentially, he's just building up a tab. All right, and he's going to have to answer that tab. So going back to Psalms chapter 21, and we'll get verse 8 again. It says, Thine hand shall find out all thine enemies. Thy right hand shall find out those that hate thee. All right, and the right hand of the Lord, the right hand of the Lord, Yahweh, is his son, Yahweh Shai. All right, and it's his word that ultimately is going forth throughout the four corners of the globe. And it's exposing, the lies and deceptions of this man Esau Edom. All right, because the earth has been given to the hand of the wicked, so he's been ultimately ruling in unrighteousness. I'm going to get this real fast. This is Psalms chapter 28. Isaiah chapter 28 and verse 17. And it says, Judgment also will I lay to the line, and righteousness to the plummet, and the hail shall sweep away the refuge of lies, and the waters shall overflow the hiding place. All right, and that hiding place, all right, goes into the deceptions of Esau Edom. He's been able to rule and to conquer in lies and deception. All right, with this truth, ultimately, this truth is exposing all those lies and deceptions. Ultimately, it's being shown that he is the devil of the scriptures. All right, he's the physical carnation of Satan. He pretty much does the bidding of Satan. All right. So nevertheless, going back to Psalm chapter 21, and we'll get verse 9, and it says, Thou shalt make them as a fiery oven in the time of thine anger. The Lord shall swallow them. The Lord shall swallow them up in his wrath, and the fire shall devour them. All right, because ultimately the ICBM nuclear missiles is going to destroy the hegemonies of Esau Edom. All right, and those that's not destroyed, they'll be rounded up as the first fruits of slavery. All right, verse 10, it says, let me go back. It says, verse 10, Their fruit shalt thou destroy from the earth, and their seed from among the children of men, because if their children be multiplied, it is for the sword, as it says in Job. It says, For they intended evil against thee, they imagined a mischievous device which they are not able to perform. All right, and that evil that's intended, all right, against the Lord, ultimately goes into that NWO, the New World Order, in which they'll get a decent portion of, you know, their works off, or they're going to get a decent portion of their plan off of the ground, you see, but they're not going to be able to bring it into full fruition. That's why it says which they are not able to perform, you know, because ultimately the Lord is going to frustrate their plans. All right. So I just want to get some you know, some precepts just going into the MOTB, you see, because right now we're in, you know, the times of where, you know, this devil is making a lot of technological advancements and stuff like that, and he's pushing it to the people as a means of a certain type of, or he's pushing it to the people as a means of salvation. All right, which it's not, you know, in its fullest stages. All right, but right now, you know, the technological advancements, you know, he has people all, you know, from you know, the ability to, you know, move things with their minds. All right, you know, the I think they call it the meta glasses. All right, and things of that nature. You know, pretty much he's trying to allure the people in. All right, but he's not going to be able to get this fully off the ground. He's going to get a vast majority of the people. All right, but he's not going to touch the elect. All right, so let's get some precepts. This is Revelation chapter 13, and actually I'm gonna start at Revelation chapter 3. All right, this is Revelation chapter 3 and verse 10. And it says, because thou hast kept the word of my patience, I will also keep thee from the hour of temptation, in which the hour of temptation is ultimately going into, you know, when the MOTB is ultimately constituted and mandated. You see, because that's going to be a great time of testing. All right, because it's going to be presented. First, it's going to be presented as, you know, a form of convenience, just as, you know, the juice was. You know, they're going to do it in this pretty much in the same manner. All right, then it's going to come a certain point in time to where it's going to be like, hey, well, you can't do this, you can't work, you can't do business, you can't do this, so on and so forth, if you don't have the MOTB, which is the RFID chip. All right, but it says, because thou hast kept the word of my patience, I will also keep thee from the hour of temptation, which shall come upon all the world to try them that dwell upon the earth. You know, so pretty much it's going to be a time to where everyone is going to be tested. All right, which 2/3 and the heathen, they going to fold. All right. All right, the elect ultimately is going to, you know, stand 10 toes for the Lord, Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai. All right, so let's get some more precepts. This is Revelation chapter 13, and we'll start at verse 15. And it says, and he had power to give life unto the image of the beast. All right, in which the image of the beast is talking about the system. It says that the image of the beast should both speak, all right, and ultimately it speaks through the laws and legislations and regulations that's pushed forth. All right, well, you can't go here unless you got this. All right, you know, you got to have this ID, because the IDs, the ID, the digital ID, it coincides, all right, with the MOTB, all right, but it in itself, the like the digital ID and stuff like that is not the MOTB. All right, the MOTB is the RFID chip. You see, but all of these things ultimately culminate with each other. All right, it's pretty much bottlenecking into the MOTB. All right, you have to have. This is what pretty much Esau Edom pushes out in society. Or you have to have digital ID. You got to have certain juices, or you got to have this, you got to have that, and so on and so forth. That's ultimately different facets of how the beast speaks. All right, through the mandates, through the legislations, through the regulations. So it says, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. So those that don't want to get with the system are ultimately going to be excommunicated. All right, and to the point to where, all right, eventually it's going to be actually deleting. All right, to deletion. All right, so those that don't want to get with the system, they're ultimately going to be deleted. All right. Verse 16, it says, and he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a charagma in their right hand or in their foreheads. All right, so it says he causeth all. So causeth means to constitute, all right, to pretty much make it to where he's requiring everybody to get a charagma. It says both small and great, so those that are insignificant in the society and those that are significant in the society. It says rich and poor, you know, those that have money, all right, the upper class, and those of the lower class. You know, it says free and bond, you know, so those that are ultimately free walking around, all right, and those that are ultimately incarcerated in the penal system. It says to receive a charagma in their right hand or in their foreheads, all right, and ultimately it can be anywhere, you know. It says, in that no man might buy or sell save he that had the charagma or the name of the beast or the number of his name, you know. So pretty much those that don't have the charagma are not going to be able to do any type of business. All right. It says, here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 603 score and six. So 666. All right. And ultimately, want to go into this, you see, because we're in a time of to where, this man is going to mandate the MOTB. All right, which he does it through small steps called incrementalism or gradualism. So he does it step by step by step, from the digital ID to, wearables, all right, so on and so forth. All right, but pretty much going to be a society to where it's going to be perpetual enslavement. All right, and it's going to be what they know as what they call the fourth industrial revolution. All right, but it's pretty much merging, man with machine. All right, but here's the punishment for those that ultimately subscribe to, the taking of that charagma. All right, this is let me see. This is Revelation chapter 14, and we'll get verse 9. And it says, the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast in his image, and receive his charagma in his forehead or in his hand, because the other scripture said in his right hand, because most people is right-handed. All right, but it can be anywhere. That's why it says, or in his hand. It says, or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of the Most High, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. It says, and this is pretty much what is known as the lake of fire. It says, and there in the smoke of in the smoke of their torment ascendeth up forever and ever, and they have no rest day nor night, who worship the beast in his image, whosoever receiveth the charagma of his name. All right, so ultimately, those that receive of the charagma, all right, the RFID chip, are ultimately going to be destroyed. All right, with ICBM nuclear hellfire. All right, so I'm going to get one more, and that'll be it. All right, which us of the nation of Yasha'Allah are not to subscribe to any type of charagma, RFID chip, anything of that nature. As it mentions in the law, those that pretty much in the law says that, if one wants to take a oil, all right, they pretty much is subscribing to someone being their owner, forever, perpetually, So for us of the nation of Israel, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, West Indians, Haitians, and Israelite foreigners, we're not supposed to subscribe to this man's systems. We're not to subscribe to this man's system. All right, we're not to take of the MOTB, you see, because we were made to fear the Lord. All right, but we understand that, the heathen is going to ultimately subscribe to it. All right, and 2/3 are that they're not going to repent, and they're going to pretty much be in the ways of captivity, so they're going to subscribe to the MOTB. All right, but nevertheless, the Lord has, ultimately predestinated an elect. All right, and the elect are going to be delivered, all right, from the said parables. That's why we got Revelation 3 and verse 10, to where the Lord is going to cover the elect, all right, in the hour of temptation. All right, so this is Romans chapter 11 and verse 4. It says, but what saith the answer? I'm going to start at verse 3. It says, Lord, they have killed thy prophets and digged down thine altars, and I am left alone, and they seek my life. Verse 4 says, but what saith the answer of the Most High unto him? I have reserved to myself 7,000 men who have not bowed the knee to the image of Baal. So being that, all right, the heathen in 2/3 is going to be subscribing to, an idol, because that's all the MOTB is an idol. All right, it's 7,000. It's a complete amount of believers. All right, it's not going to serve an image. All right, verse 5, it says, even so, then at this present time also there is a remnant according to the election of grace, in which every generation the Lord always deals with an elect. All right, and in these times, all right, the Lord has an elect. All right, and the elect is not ultimately going to serve whatever system that Esau Edom is coming with. But yeah, I just want to go into that. Adoran Tazaza Banaya Palos, that was a beautiful edification of the spirit. Wadawan Tazah, Atham Yash Layla Tawab, Lord as well. You have a good night. Washalam Lakam, which is peace unto you all.